First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Yahweh is the name of who this world ignorantly calls God. Yahweh Shai is the name of who this world ignorantly calls Jesus. Bahashem means in the name, Rakah means spirit, and Quadash means holy, and that's all in the Paleo Hebrew. I also want to give double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Okay, today's lesson, I wanted to go ahead and break down Daniel, the 8th chapter. Okay, because this goes into history of those two beasts, right? The kingdoms, two main kingdoms that were ruling on the earth, right? In history about the Israelites getting destroyed, right? Because Daniel 8 also links with Daniel 7 and Daniel the 2nd chapter. It also links directly to First Maccabees chapter 1, right? This is all dealing, right? These chapters, they all deal with the Medo-Persian Empire and the Greek Empire, and pretty much the Greeks, throwing hell on the Israelites, right? Going into when Antiochus Epiphanes, right, was ruling, and he was pretty much, the start of the Hellenization, right? And this is the history that's written in the Apocrypha that these Christians, these Catholics don't like to go into. Because when you read the Apocrypha and you read how the Greeks were throwing hell on the nation of Israel, the Israelites, they're Hellenizing them, right? Making them be like themselves, okay? Telling them, if you don't follow my law, we're going to kill you, okay? So the Israelites ended up being like them, okay? When you skip all that history of the Israelites pretty much putting away that law and becoming like the Greeks, right? You read the New Testament and you're trumped when it says there's no difference between Jew nor Greek, right? You think that he came to save everybody, and that's what they teach. But what they don't understand, right, or what they understand but they choose to ignore is that the Apocrypha, right, is literally just history. The whole Bible is just a book of history, the history of the Israelites, and it also throws in there the history of all these other nations. Okay, but Daniel 8 deals with prophecy, right? Daniel, right, received a vision and he prophesied of two kingdoms that were going to come, right? And what these rulers were going to be doing. But let's just get into it. This little preface. This is Daniel chapter 8 and verse 1. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. Right? And this was going into at the time of the Babylonian Empire. Right? Belshazzar, he was, let's see, Belshazzar was the son and crown prince of Nabonidus, the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? Because also this goes into Daniel, the 5th chapter. Let's just get that real quick. Make this a real extensive lesson. Daniel, the 5th chapter, right? You have how this was when the writing appeared on the wall, right? And they were pretty much calling, who can decipher this, right? And they called Daniel, and he pretty much deciphered the writing on the wall, and then he came to say that, hey, the Babylonian Empire is gonna fall, right? It's gonna fall, and that's exactly what happened, as it says right here. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Okay, so when Daniel got this vision, he was in the Babylonian Empire, and he predicted, right? He interpreted the vision. He spoke about what was going to happen, right? The two kingdoms, or all the kingdoms that are going to come, and right now we've seen it all come to pass. But it says, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Right? And what this is talking about is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire. Right? And it says that there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Right? It says that one of the horns was higher than the other, and it's talking about the Persian Empire, right? Because the Persian Empire was more extolled, right? That's what it's known for today, was the Persian Empire, right? That's the horn that exalted itself higher than the other one, and it also came up last, right? And this links up directly to Daniel 7, right? But it's said differently here. It's and actually the only thing it says different is that it's a bear instead of a ram, right? But it says in Daniel chapter 7, verse 5, it says, "And behold, another beast," right? Because the second beast is dealing with the Medo Persian Empire. The first one was dealing with the Assyrian Babylonian Empire, right? Which, as we read in Daniel, the fifth chapter at the end, okay, that fell, and Darius the. Let's just get it one more time. I don't want to be butchering up the scriptures, right? It links with Daniel 5 when it tells you that the kingdom fell, Belshazzar fell, and Darius the Mede, right, took it. So going back to Daniel chapter 7, right, the first one is Syrian Babylonian, and you have the second one, Medo Persian. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, right? The exact same thing we read in Daniel 8, how one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last, talking about the Persian Empire. And it says, "And it had three ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it, and they said, Thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh." That's going into the three kingdoms that they devoured in that time, going to Egypt, Libya, and I think it was Babylon, if I remember correctly. But the point is that this is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, right? And they actually get that correctly here in the blue letter. If you go to Daniel chapter 2nd, or the second chapter, it goes into it. They have it labeled. The interpretation Babylon, also with the Assyrian Babylon captivity, or the Assyrian Babylon Empire, and the Medo Persians, which that's what we're going into today. This is actually what we're going into today. The Medo Persian Empire with the Greek Empire. And then Rome, which that's what we're in right now, the last empire. But as we were reading, once again, then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns. And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last, Medo Persian Empire. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, exactly how we read in Daniel 7, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great, right? Because this was a great empire, right? And this was the empire that was ruling when you watched the movie 300, okay? And in that movie 300, you had Xerxes, okay? Xerxes, commonly known as Xerxes the Great, was a Persian ruler who served as the fourth king of kings of the Achaemenid Empire, reigning from 486 BC until his assassination in 465 BC. He was the son of Darius the Great and Atossa. Okay, so when you watch 300 and you see that great army, right, and you had the 300 men, right, trying to fight, and ultimately they got destroyed because if you have understanding, right? All these rulers and kings, right? They were all set up to play out their part in Bible prophecy, right? The reason why you had great armies that at one point they couldn't be taken down is because they were being backed by Yahweh, right? It was Yahweh's plan that they ruled for a certain amount of time so they could play out his script and play their part in his movie. Okay, and in this part of the movie, the Medo-Persian Empire, they were unstoppable, right? Left, right, down. Nobody could stop them. Okay? It says in verse 5, and as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Right? And that he-goat is going into Alexander the Great, right? Alexander the Greek. Because ultimately, if you read, we go to Daniel 7, right? It goes into the leopard, which is talking about Alexander the Great. Okay, and that this is the third beast, the third empire. This one came after the Medo-Persian Empire, and it took down the Medo-Persian Empire. And we're going to read about that. But it says, and as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, right? This empire was really swift, right? They were quick, because if you look into the history of Alexander the Greek, or Alexander the Great, whatever you want to call him, right? He pretty much conquered the whole known world in 6 to 8 years, right? That was something that was never seen before, right? He did it quickly, right? He didn't touch the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, right? That notable horn is going into his power, right? Because, as I said, with the Medo-Persian Empire. Whenever one of these empires was ruling, they had great power. Okay, there's nothing that could stop them because they were backed by Yahweh, right? They had the power of Yahweh behind them. But if you read in Daniel, the seventh chapter, let's read what it says here. It says that after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard. Right? What is a leopard known for? Being swift, being fast, being strategic. Which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given into it. Right, and this is going to tie later into what we're going to read. But those 4 heads, the 4 wings, is going into Alexander the Great's 4 generals, which came after him. Right, Antigonus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. Right, and this is going to play a key factor into Daniel the 8th chapter. Just keep that in mind. This is talking about Alexander the Great's 4 generals. But Daniel chapter 8 and verse 6, it says, And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. Right? That ram being the Medo-Persian Empire, and that he-goat being Alexander the Great and his empire. Okay, the Greeks, they came to that ram, and he came in the fury of his power, right? Backed by Yahweh. It says, And I saw him close unto the ram, and he was moved with the choler against him. Right? You look into that word choler. Let's get it. You go into that word choler, morar, and it means bitterness. Right? Bitter, to show bitterness, to make bitter, extreme anger, vexed, or grieved. Because a key part about this is that between all this scuffle, right, you had a Darius, the king of Persia, right? He was sending mail, right? Sending letters with Alexander, right? And you had over here Darius. Alexander was telling Darius, "Hey, I want your kingdom," pretty much, right? Because he was conquering the whole known earth at that time, right? He was telling Darius, "Hey, I want your kingdom," and Darius was telling him, "Hey, I don't know about that. I'll give you this, and that. We could split it. I could give you a little bit of the kingdom. I'll give you a woman so we could unify the kingdoms." And Alexander was just not with that. He said, "Nah, I don't want to compromise. I want your whole kingdom," right? So he was ultimately in a bitter state of mind because this was going on for a while, right? Letters and letters and letters, and Alexander wasn't getting his way. So when you read, and it says, And he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Right? Alexander came with the fullness of his power. Right? He came with the power of Yahweh. Okay, because it was his time, according to Bible prophecy, for him to come and rule. Right? There was nothing that was going to stop him. As it says, he broke those 2 horns. He broke that empire. There was no power in the ram to stand before him. There's nothing that these Medo-Persians, right, these Persians could do against Alexander because it was their time to fall. It says, But he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Right? No allies of the Persian Empire or the Medo-Persian Empire was able to help them. Right? Because, hey, as I've been saying, right, everything that is happening on the earth is according to Bible prophecy, and it was meant at that time for them to go down. Right? And also their allies weren't even as strong as the Medo-Persian Empire. Right? They're just through. Right? Alexander was coming with full force. It says, Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, their great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 wings of heaven. Let me reread that. I butchered it. It said, Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And actually, let me go back to this point and let me get this account in First Maccabees. Right? This is First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 1. It says, And it happened after that Alexander son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chetam, had smitten Darius the king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Right? Exactly. Linking perfectly what we've been reading going into Daniel the second chapter, Daniel the fifth chapter, Daniel the second and eighth chapter, right? And you can literally search it up. We were looking on Google and it all says the same thing because this is a history book. And it says, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. Right? He was going around and just conquering. Right? In 6 to 8 years, he conquered all of Asia. It says, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years, and then he died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And I'm going to read a little bit more. Verse 9, and after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them at many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Okay, so what did it just say right there? Right, Alexander took over Persians and the Medes. He ruled, and then after a little time, after 12 years, he became sick, right, and he died. And after that, his servants, right, took his place and ruled up over him, right, which that's going into Alexander's four great generals, which, as we read in Daniel the seventh chapter, is talking about those four wings, the four heads upon that beast, which when we read in Daniel 8 and verse 8, it says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, right? He pretty much died, as we just read, right? He became sick and died. Some say that he was poisoned. Some say that they came against him. But what it looks like is that, hey, we don't really know. We're not 100%, right? But he did come to pass, right? He did die. That great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven, right? Going into his four generals, they came up after him. And then it says, the little horn. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. Right? And this little horn, right, which came forth out of those four winds, is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, right? Antiochus Epiphanes, right, which was a pretty much, right, he was a killer, right? He was completely wicked, right? Not like Alexander, these other rulers were not wicked, but Antiochus was the epitome of wickedness, and ultimately he was the one that brought hell upon the nation of Israel, right? Because when he had Alexander ruling, right, he was at peace with the Israelites, right? One of those reasons being that one of the high priests showed him, right, showed Alexander that it was written in prophecy that he was gonna come up and rule, right? So he had a sense of respect for the Israelites, and um he let them follow the law, statutes, and commandments, and do whatever they had to do according to the law, right? He was understanding. Okay, but what happened is that when he fell, those four generals, hey, they started ruling. And out of one of them came forth the little horn, which is Antiochus Epiphanes, right, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land, which is talking about Jerusalem, right, the nation of Israel, Judea, right? He went to go and destroy that place. Let's link this to First Maccabees, right? This is First Maccabees, right? When we read at verse 9, it says, and after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, right? Who did it come out of? It came out of his servants, right? That came from Alexander, those four generals. Out of him, right, came out Antiochus. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Okay, and Let me search up Antiochus just to prove that he came out of that root. Antiochus Epiphanes. Man, I can never spell that name. Antiochus for Epiphanes, right? Was a Greek Hellenistic king who ruled the Seleucid Empire. He was son of a king Antiochus III the Great, originally named. Let me get it. Antiochus, son of Silius, right? Antiochus, right? It was all through that seed line of Silius, as we read. He was one of the four generals which came Antiochus, right? As we read in Daniel the 8th chapter. Okay, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even till the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Right? And the host and the stars is talking about the nation of Israel, going into how he pretty much destroyed the Israelites. Right? It says, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Okay, and let's get that in Maccabees, right? Let's get that. Verse 13, it says, then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. Okay, so here it is. You have Jake, right? Started pretty much going after their ways, because if we read down here in verse 48, I think, verse 64, no, we'll get to it. But pretty much what happened is that Antiochus said, hey, if you don't follow my laws, you're going to be put to death. And now I need to find it, man. Right. Verse 50, it says, and whosoever will not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. Okay, and you read upon that, it tells you what he was telling them, what he wanted to do. Okay, he was pretty much saying, verse 41, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, right? Going back to the image of the beast, that new world order, right? One rule, one everything. It all goes back to the beginning of that beast system, starting with the Greeks, one people. It says, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by the messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manners of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all their ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. Okay? And that's exactly what we're reading right here. Verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and they cast down the truth to the ground, and they practiced and it prospered. Right? He pretty much destroyed the temple. Okay, and you also had Jake, right, that was turning and saying, "Hey, let us just let us do what he's saying, right? Because if not, he's gonna kill us, right? That's why it says here, and an host was given him against a daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and he cast down the truth to the ground, and he practiced and prospered." Right? He had Jake. Let's get that. Yeah, Jake, right? That was pretty much helping him do the wickedness. Um, right, verse 51. In the selfsame manner wrote he to the host to And in the self same manner wrote he to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city, that many of the people who gathered unto them, to wit, every one that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even whatsoever they could flee for succor. Now the 15th day of the month of Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they had found, they burnt them with fire. And whosoever was found with any the book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should be put him to death. Okay. Um, man, there. You read this whole chapter, and it shows you, right, the nature of these people, right? Because these people, hey, they were Edomites, right? They were Edomites, and if you go to First Maccabees chapter 4, I think it's 4, right, in verse 61, it tells you. And actually, I'm gonna get this point later when we get to that point. But pretty much, these are Edomites, right? They came out of that lineage of Alexander. And Alexander, it tells you who was the father of Alexander. Alexander the Great. Philip the Macedonian. Right? Let's see where does Philip come from? Son of Philip the Macedonian. Let's see if we can get his parents. Macedon. Um, Philip to a Macedonian. Let's do a little time track. Who was the father of Philip to a Macedonian? Amenitus. Amenitus. Macedon. Now let's get this guy. Who was the father of Amenitus III Macedon? Alexander. Parents Amenitus. Man, you have to really pull out the what's it called? The timeline for this one, because this goes way back. Pretty much the point is that, let's see, Macedonian, ancient kingdom. Macedonian, also called Macedon, was an ancient kingdom of the periphery of archaic and classical Greece. Capitals Babylon. Um, but pretty much these were Edomites. That's the point I'm trying to establish, is that these were Edomites. Macedonia, Alexander the Great. Because Ptolemy, I think that was Ptolemy, yup, okay. Yeah, pretty much these were Edomites. That's the point I was trying to establish, but I couldn't really get it linked directly like I wanted to, going through the fathers' figures. It would take too long going down that timeline to get to the point of where it says that they're Edomites, right? According to Google. Let's go back to Daniel, the 8th chapter. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 13, it says, Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint, and this is now Daniel seeing two angels, right? He said, Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgressions of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Right? And this is talking about a time period of how long they're going to have to be going through this, right? How long it was going to be till pretty much the Israelites were pretty much being Hellenized, okay, in that type of hardcore fashion, right? And if you go into that time frame of 2,200, 300 days, 300 in days in years, it goes into 6.1 years pretty much. And if you go into the time frame in Maccabees, it goes into when this began. And these time frames in the Bible, when it tells you this amount of days, and it goes into years, right? It depends where you start that time frame, right? It's not always 100%, but it's going into a time period of when they're going to be catching this hell, right? And if you go to First Maccabees, it says it began in around 40th verse, um, right? Verse 54 says, "Now the 15th day of the month of Caslu, in the 145th year," right, is when this began. The 145th year. I think that's 145. And if you go to First Maccabees chapter 4, this is when the sanctuary was cleansed, right? Which just goes into when Judas Maccabees, right? The Maccabean revolt, right? When the nation of Israel started pretty much getting together and fighting. Okay, and this is actually why we have the holy day of Hanukkah. It's remembering this right here, right? The Let's get that right now. Just a little bit more history. Hanukkah is a Jewish festival commemorating the recovery of Jerusalem and subsequent rededication of the Second Temple at the beginning of the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire. Okay, but if we read in First Maccabees chapter 4, and this is going into when pretty much Judas Maccabees was raised up to fulfill this prophecy, right? To clean the sanctuary and to bring back some type of order. And let's search up sanctuary and this right here, right? This is First Maccabees chapter 4, in verse 35. I'll start at. It says, "Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judah's soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went to Antiochia, and gathered together a company of strangers, and having made his army greater than it was, he purposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary." Right? This is going into how they pretty much brought back that order. Right? Upon this, all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuaries desolate and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentations and cast ashes upon their heads. Okay, and they fell down, and when the Judas appointed certain men to go and clean the sanctuary. But this all happened after a certain time, right? We go into verse 52. It says, "Now on the 5th and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning." Okay, so the time frame was from 145 to 148. Like I said, the time frames are not always perfect, but when it's going into a certain period of time, right, 2,300 days is going into that time that, hey, they're going to be catching hell, but after that time period, the sanctuary is going to be cleansed. And that's talking about Judas Maccabees being raised up and cleaning the sanctuary exactly how we read. Okay, but pretty much then it goes into breaking it down, right? The angels breaking it down. Let's just read that. This is Daniel chapter 8, verse 15. "And it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and saw for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said to Gabriel, Make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. But he touched me, and he set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be." And it says the ram's identity. "The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. The goat and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power." Right? And this is, as I said, Medo-Persian Empire. That rough goat, that he-goat being Alexander the Great. The four standing up is his four generals. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sensitive shall stand up. This is talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper in practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And the key point I want to bring out is that it says that his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. It says that because the power that he has was bestowed upon him by Yahweh. It says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Okay? And we like to liken this precept to what's going on right now because it's the same people, right? The same way you had Antiochus Epiphanes, right? Epiphanes, I can't say that, he was destroying by his policy, which is laws and legislations. He was pretty much saying, if you don't follow the Greek ways, right, if you don't become like the Greek, you're gonna get killed, right? It's the same thing they're doing today, right? They're gonna come with that, with the same way, with the same thing. If you don't take the jab, if you don't take the mark, hey, you're gonna be put to death, okay? And I wanted to get one more scripture. I think that was in First Maccabees chapter 1. First Maccabees chapter 1. I think it was in 1. Let's see. Going into how they came with peace, but ultimately they were coming. I think it's not in 1. 5 maybe. Let's check it. Let me search it up. Sent tributary, something along those lines. Tribunes. 16, no. Yeah, I can't remember off the top right now. But pretty much, Antiochus sent to gather up the tributary, right, the tax of, man, I have to find it. I have to find it. This is bothering me. First Maccabees, tribunes. It's not 16 and 19, right? Because that was past what we just read. Wow, it really just escaped my mind. Let me think a couple more seconds. If I can't get it, then it's just not meant to be. It's pretty much going into wow, that really escaped me. Let's see. First Maccabees 5. It was in 4. It has to be 3. Yeah, it has to be 3. If it's not this, then I'm gonna just keep going. It's 2. I'm just trying to add some more edification to this. Um, yeah, I can't find it. Let's just keep going. Daniel 8, verse 26, it says, in the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true, wherefore shut thou up in the prison, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I arose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Right? Because a lot of the times the prophets, they were seeing all these visions, but they didn't know what the hell they were looking at, right? Right? They don't know what they were looking at. But through the Spirit, right, now we understand what these prophecies mean, right? Because we've seen them play out, right? We've been giving the Holy Spirit to be able to discern and to read, understand what it's saying, right? Starting with only the 144,000 are going to be able to do that, the prophets, and those that starts with the leadership of the outer bishops and apostles of Great Millstone, the true prophets coming back. But let me just give a little recap, right? You start with The ram, two horns, one were high, talking about the Persian Empire, Medo-Persian Empire. Then you go into the ram, which is going into Medo-Persian Empire. He goat, Alexander the Great. Then you go into how he died, the four winds of heaven, his four generals, which out of those four generals came out that little horn going into Antiochus Epiphanes, and how he went towards the Pleasant Land, right, to destroy the Israelites, pretty much sacked the temple. Then after a certain time, the sanctuary was cleansed, right, because Judas Maccabees was raised up, and that was pretty much Daniel the 8th chapter, right, linking it to Daniel the 7th chapter, Daniel the 2nd chapter, and First Maccabees. So hopefully this was edifying. Sometimes I get all over the place, but I'm just trying to establish that point um, a little bit stronger, right? Because ultimately the Bible is a puzzle, right? And you have to pull precepts from over here to tie them to the scriptures over here to ultimately paint that picture. But hopefully this was edifying. With that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Rakak, Wadash, and double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Shalom to elect. Shalom.